What would you do if your dog suddenly went crazy in the snow, digging like their life depended on it? Would you trust them? One little girl did, and what she uncovered beneath that frozen ground would save 2 lives hanging by a thread, and expose a crime that was meant to stay hidden forever. The silence in the forest was wrong. Not peaceful, not calm, just wrong. The kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl, where even the wind seems to hold its breath. Pine trees stood frozen under layers of ice, their branches bending low but refusing to snap. Everything was covered in white, thick and undisturbed, like the world had been erased. That morning started like any other routine day for 2 officers, Daniel Harper and Lisa Marino. Got a call about a suspicious car parked near some closed-off service road. Nothing unusual, probably just someone who got turned around in the storm. Daniel's last words over the radio were casual. Probably just lost. We'll take a look and head back. Then the line went dead. Not with panic or shouting, just silence. At first, nobody worried. The forest was known for killing radio signals. But when 15 minutes became 30, when calls went unanswered and GPS stopped updating, concern started creeping in. The weather turned nasty, fast. Snow fell harder. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Helicopters couldn't fly. Cars couldn't reach the area. The forest was closing its grip. What nobody knew, what nobody could have guessed, was that Daniel and Lisa weren't walking around anymore. They weren't lost. They were underground, buried deep beneath the snow, trapped in total darkness. Cold, pressing in from every direction, stealing their warmth, their strength, their time. Above them, nothing moved. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just endless white. And that's what made it so terrifying. In a forest, this quiet danger doesn't announce itself. It waits. The little girl had been told 100 times not to go that deep into the woods. Everyone in town knew the rule once winter hit. The forest was dangerous. Snow hid sinkholes, fallen trees, frozen streams that looked solid but weren't. Even experienced hikers got lost out there. But she hadn't meant to wander so far. Her name was Emily. 9 years old. School was canceled because of the storm, and the house felt suffocating. Her dad was working a double shift. Her mom hadn't been around in months, the only one who understood her need to escape, to breathe, to feel safe outside those walls, walked beside her now, a German shepherd named Rex. Rex wasn't supposed to be off duty. He wasn't supposed to be here. But he'd been her protector ever since everything in her life fell apart. He was more than just a police dog to Emily. He was family. She'd only meant to stay near the edge of the trees, just long enough for Rex to stretch his legs. And at first, that's what they did. They walked slowly, Emily's boots crunching softly, Rex moving with that confident ease he always had, scanning everything like he was still on patrol. But then something changed. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was training. Maybe it was something deeper. Whatever it was, Emily felt it too. That pull in her chest, telling her something wasn't right. She stopped walking. "Rex?" she whispered. The dog slowed, then went completely still. His whole posture shifted in an instant. His tail went stiff. His ears locked forward. The playful calm vanished, replaced by something sharp, something alert. Emily's heart started racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely louder than the falling snow. Rex didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead into the forest, into the darker trees, the deeper snow. Emily hugged her coat tighter, suddenly aware of how alone they were. She thought about turning back, thought about the rules, thought about her dad's warnings. Then Rex took a step forward, not playful, not curious, purposeful. Emily swallowed hard. She shouldn't have followed him. But she did, and with each step deeper into that forest, she had no idea she was walking straight toward people whose lives were already slipping away. Rex stopped so suddenly, Emily nearly walked right into him. 1 second, he was moving forward with purpose. The next, he was frozen solid. Every muscle locked. His ears stood straight up, twitching slightly, like he was tuning into a frequency no human could hear. His head lowered just a fraction, eyes fixed on a patch of snow that looked exactly like everything else around it. "Rex," Emily whispered again. this time fear creeping into her voice. He didn't respond. The forest felt different now. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It pressed down on her chest, heavy and wrong. Emily followed his gaze, squinting at the ground. All she saw was snow. Thick, smooth, undisturbed. Then Rex let out a low whine. Not a bark or a growl. Something else entirely. Concern. He stepped forward slowly, cautiously, like he was approaching something fragile. He lowered his nose and sniffed deeply, drawing in the frozen air. His breathing changed. Faster, sharper, urgent. Emily felt her stomach twist. "What do you smell?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. Rex didn't answer. Instead, without warning, he dropped his front legs and started digging. Snow flew everywhere as his powerful paws tore into the ground. He worked with frantic precision, scraping, pushing, digging deeper and deeper. His movements weren't playful. This wasn't chasing a scent or uncovering some buried stick. This was different. "Rex, stop," Emily cried, panic rising. "What are you doing?" But Rex didn't slow down. His breathing grew heavier. He whined again, louder this time, then barked. Sharp, short, urgent. The sound echoed through the trees like a warning. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, her gloves sinking into the snow. She tried to understand, tried to see what he was seeing. As Rex dug, the snow beneath collapsed unnaturally, sinking more than it should have. Emily's breath caught. A dug faster, then, suddenly, he stopped. Rex lowered his head into the hole he'd made and went completely still. His body trembled, not from cold, but from intensity. He sniffed once more, then let out a sound Emily had never heard from him before. A cry. It wasn't loud, but it was filled with urgency and distress. Rex backed up slightly and pawed at the hole again, then looked back at Emily. His dark eyes were wide, insistent. He wanted her to understand. Emily leaned closer, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She placed her hand near the edge of the hole, listening, watching, holding her breath, and that's when she felt it. A faint vibration beneath the snow, not wind, not shifting ground. Something else, something alive. Emily, fruzy. Her hand hovered just above the snow as she leaned closer to the hole Rex had dug. The forest seemed to hold its breath with her. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined it. Just another trick of the wind. Then she heard it again. Tap. It was faint. So faint she almost missed it. Not loud enough to echo. Not strong enough to break through. But it was there. A sound that didn't belong. Emily pressed her ear closer to the ground, her heart pounding painfully. Rex lowered his head beside hers, whining softly, his nose nearly touching the snow. "Tap, tap!" Emily's eyes went wide. "That's not the wind," she whispered, her voice shaking. Rex let out a sharp bark, then started digging again, harder this time. Snow sprayed over Emily's coat as his paws worked furiously. The neat white surface collapsed in uneven chunks, revealing darker, packed snow beneath. The sound grew clearer. A muffled thud, a scrape. Something struggling. Emily's breath came fast and shallow. Her fingers went numb, not just from the cold, but from fear. She wanted to stand up. Wanted to run. Every instinct screamed that she shouldn't be here. But Rex didn't stop. He dug with desperation now, his movements wild yet controlled, like he knew exactly where to aim. His whines grew louder, more urgent, and he barked again in short, sharp bursts meant to alert anyone listening. No one was. Emily swallowed hard and grabbed the small shovel strapped to her backpack. Her hands shook as she began scooping snow away, helping Rex as best she could. Each scoop revealed more compacted snow, packed unnaturally tight. "Someone's under there," she whispered, her voice breaking. The tapping came again, stronger this time. Tap, tap. Tears stung Emily's eyes as reality hit her. Whoever was down there was alive. Barely. And every second they stayed buried. The cold was stealing more life away. "Hold on!" Emily cried, her voice rising despite herself. "Ere. Please, just hold on." Rex dug faster, his breathing ragged. Tense soothingly, his paw struck something solid. He froze. Emily's heart stopped. Rex gently brushed the snow aside with careful movements. Slower now, more precise. Beneath the thinning layer, something dark emerged. "Fabric," Emily gasped. She scraped away more snow, her fingers aching, her vision blurring with tears. A sleeve appeared, dark blue, stiff with frost, then a shoulder, then a face. A man's face. His eyes were closed, his skin-paled lips tinged blue, a strip of silver tape pressed tightly over his mouth. Emily screamed. Rex barked wildly, circling, then returned to the man's side, nudging his shoulder, whining loudly. The man's chest moved, just barely. He was alive. Emily collapsed back into the snow, shaking, staring at the officer buried beneath her feet. And somewhere beneath the snow beside him, she knew he wasn't alone. Emily's scream tore through the trees, sharp and terrified, before the forest swallowed it whole. She scrambled backward, hands slipping in the snow, heart pounding so violently she thought it might burst. Her eyes stayed locked on the man's face, pale, motionless, half-buried. That tape across his mouth looked wrong, unnatural, like someone wanted to make sure no sound ever escaped. "Oh no, oh no," she whispered, her breath coming in panicked bursts. Rex rushed to the man's side, barking urgently, then lowered his head and pressed his nose against the officer's cheek. He whined softly, nudging him again and again, trying to wake him from some terrible sleep. The man groaned. Emily froze. His eyelids fluttered, just barely. His chest rose in a shallow, Unaben breath. Snow clung to his eyelashes. His skin looked numb and gray from the cold. "He's alive," Emily whispered, disbelief flooding her voice. "Rex, he's alive." Rex barked again, louder this time, his tail stiff with urgency. He pawed at the snow around the officer's body, careful now, controlled, digging just enough to free his shoulders and chest. Emily forced herself to move. She crawled back toward them, hands shaking as she brushed snow away from the man's face. The tape over his mouth was frosted stiff. She hesitated, fear tightening her chest. "It's okay," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the man or herself. "We're here." Her fingers worked at the edge of the tape, peeling it back slowly. The skin beneath was raw and pale. The man gasped sharply as cold air hit his lips, sucking in a painful breath like it was his first in hours. He coughed weakly. Emily jumped. "Easy, don't move," she cried. The man's eyes cracked open, unfocused and glassy. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse rasp came out. His gaze shifted, first to Emily, then to Rex. Relief flickered in his eyes. "Help," he whispered. Emily nodded frantically. "I will. I promise I'll get help." That's when Rex suddenly stiffened. His ears snapped forward. His body tensed, not in relief, but in alarm. He turned sharply and began digging again, just a few feet away from the first hole. Emily followed his movement, dread flooding her chest. "No," she whispered. "There's someone else." Rex dug faster, snow flying once more. His barks grew frantic, desperate. Emily dropped beside him and helped, clawing at the snow with numb fingers. Then it happened. The snow shifted. A hand, pale, shaking, barely moving, broke through the surface. Emily let out a sob. "Rex, there's another one." 2 officers, buried alive, running out of time. Emily's breath hitched as she grabbed the hand sticking out of the snow. It was ice cold, stiff, barely responsive. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please be alive." Rex barked sharply, then dug around the second body with frantic urgency. Snow flew in every direction as he worked, paws moving so fast Emily could barely keep up. She scooped snow away with trembling hands, fingers aching as the cold bit deep. Bit by bit, the shape beneath became clear. A uniform, a shoulder, a chest that wasn't moving. "No, no, no," Emily cried. Rex stopped digging for just a second and pressed his nose against the officer's face. He whined softly, then let out a low, distressed sound that made Emily's chest tighten. This wasn't how Rex reacted to danger. This was how he reacted to loss. Emily's heart pounded. "Breathe," she whispered desperately. "Please, breathe." She brushed snow away from the officer's mouth and nose, lips where he blew. Skin was dangerously pale. She leaned closer, holding her breath, trying to feel even the faintest puff of air. Nothing. Panic surged through her. Tears spilled freely now, freezing on her cheeks. She looked around wildly, as if someone might suddenly appear. No one did. Rex suddenly shifted position, pressing his body against the officer's chest, then curling partially over them. His thick fur covered as much of the person as possible, shielding them from the biting wind. Emily stared. Rex was trying to keep them warm. "Oh, Rex," she whispered. The first officer groaned again, weak but alive, breathing shallow and uneven. Emily crawled over to him, fear clawing at her chest. "I'm here," she said softly. "Help is coming. Promise." She didn't know if that was true, but she needed him to believe it. Rex lifted his head suddenly and barked again, sharp and commanding, as if ordering her to act. Emily understood. They couldn't stay here. The second officer was slipping away. Every second buried in the snow stole more heat, more restrained. If she waited, if she hesitated, she might lose them forever. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her glove and forced herself to think. "I'm going to get help," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'll come back, I swear." Rex looked at her, his dark eyes intense, filled with purpose. He barked, once short and strong, then lay back down beside the officers, body pressed protectively against them. Emily stood up slowly, legs trembling, heart pounding. Leaving them felt wrong. Staying felt impossible. And somewhere deep down, she knew this was the moment everything depended on what she did next. Emily stood frozen between two impossible choices. The wind picked up, blowing loose snow across the clearing, stinging her face like needles. The forest no longer felt silent, it felt hostile. Time was slipping away with every breath, and she could almost feel it ticking down inside her chest. If she stayed, the officers might not last. If she left, they might die alone. Her gaze shifted from the first officer, barely conscious, to the second, frighteningly still beneath Rex's body. The dog remained pressed against them, muscles tense, breath heavy as he tried to share what little warmth he had. Emily's hands shook. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the wind. The first officer's eyes fluttered open again. He tried to lift his head but failed, a weak groan escaping his throat. His gaze found Emily, confusion and pain clouding his expression. "Don't leave," he murmured. Emily's heart cracked. "I'll come back," she said quickly, kneeling beside him. "I promise. I won't leave you. I just have to get help." She didn't know if he heard her. Rex lifted his head and looked directly at Emily. His eyes were intense, alert, filled with understanding that made her chest ache. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't panicking. He was waiting for her to decide. Emily swallowed hard. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Think before you act," but this wasn't a problem that could be thought through slowly. This was about seconds, about survival. She reached into a backpack with trembling fingers and pulled out her scarf. Carefully, she wrapped it around the first officer's neck, tucking it into his uniform for warmth. Then she draped her extra gloves over the second officer's chest. "It's not much," she whispered, tears streaming freely now. "But it's all I have." Rex let out a low whine, as if urging her on. Emily stood, legs weak beneath her. She looked around, memorizing every tree, every bend in the path, every detail she might need to find her way back. "I'm going to run," she said aloud, voice shaking but determined. "I'll bring help. You have to stay alive." She turned to Rex and knelt in front of him, pressing her forehead gently against his. "Don't let them go," she whispered. Rex barked once, deep and steady. A promise. Emily took one last look at the two buried officers, then turned toward the forest. Her heart pounded as she took her first step away, because now there was no turning back. Emily ran. The moment she turned away from the clearing, fear slammed into her like a wall. The forest blurred around her as she pushed through knee-deep snow, boots slipping, lungs burning with every breath. Cold air tore into her chest, sharp and unforgiving. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Behind her, Rex stayed with the officers, alone in the snow, trusting her to come back. That thought alone kept her moving. Branches whipped at her coat as she forced her way through the trees, stumbling more than once, barely catching herself before falling face first into the snow. Her legs screamed in protest. Already numb, already heavy. She'd never run this far, never this fast, never this scared. "Help?" she whispered between gasps, though no one was there to hear. The wind howled louder now, carrying snow sideways, erasing the trail she'd made almost instantly. Panic clawed at her chest. What if she couldn't find her way back? What if the officers didn't last? No, she told herself fiercely. Don't think about that. She focused on one thing, getting to the ranger station near the forest edge. It wasn't fun. It only felt far, because fear stretched every second into agony. Her foot caught on a buried root, and she went down hard. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Snow filled her gloves, soaked her sleeves. For a terrifying moment, she lay there, dizzy, staring up at the gray sky, wondering if she could even get back up. Tears streamed down her face, freezing instantly. "I can't stop," she whispered. She forced herself onto her knees, 10 air feet legs, trembling violently. Pain shot through her ankle, but she ignored it. Pain didn't matter. Lives did. Emily staggered forward again, breath coming in ragged sobs. Her vision blurred, not just from tears, but from exhaustion. She could feel her strength fading, her body begging her to give up. That's when she saw it. A dark shape through the trees. A building. Hope surged through her like electricity. She screamed, really screamed, throwing every ounce of strength into her voice. "Help. Please help." The sound tore out of her throat, raw and desperate. She waved her arms wildly as she ran the last stretch, legs threatening to collapse beneath her. The door of the ranger station flew open. A man stepped out, eyes widening in shock at the sight of her snow-covered, crying, barely standing. "There are officers," she gasped, nearly falling forward. "They're buried. They're alive. Please hurry!" Her knees buckled as strong hands caught her. Behind her, somewhere deep in the forest, Rex was still waiting. The moment Emily's words sank in, everything changed. The ranger's calm expression vanished, replaced by shock. He grabbed his radio with shaking hands, voice sharp and urgent as he called in the report. "We have 2 officers buried alive in the north sector. Repeat, buried alive. They're alive but unresponsive. We need immediate medical response." Static crackled back, followed by stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Inside the station, phones rang all at once. Maps were spread across tables. Someone pulled up the last known GPS location of the missing officers. When the coordinates matched Emily's frantic description, the room went quiet. "Oh my God," one of the deputies whispered. "That's where they lost Cigna." Search teams that had been preparing for a ground sweep suddenly understood the truth. The officers hadn't wandered off. They hadn't gotten lost. They'd been taken. Buried. Guilt rippled through the room like a shockwave. If they'd known sooner, if they'd pushed harder, ignored the weather warnings, moved faster, those officers might not have spent hours freezing beneath the snow. "There's no time," the commander snapped. "Gear up now." Medics rushed in, hauling thermal blankets, oxygen tanks, 4 kits. Snowmobiles were prepped at record speed. The storm was still raging, but no one hesitated. Out in the parking lot, engines roared to life. Emily sat wrapped in a thick blanket, shaking uncontrollably, not just from cold, but from fear. An officer knelt in front of her, gripping her small hands gently. "You did the right thing," he sighed firmly. "You saved their lives." Emily swallowed, voice barely audible. My dog, Rex. He's still with them. The officer's jaw tightened. Then he's buying them time. As the rescue convoy sped toward the forest, radios crackled with updates. Hypothermia risk critical, burial time extended. Survival window closing. One medic shook his head grimly. If we're not there in minutes. No one finished the sentence. Snowmobiles tore through the forest, headlights cutting through the storm. Branches snapped. Snow sprayed high into the air. Every second felt stolen. Deep in the woods, beneath layers of snow and silence, 2 officers clung to life. And lying beside them, refusing to move, a police dog waited, holding the line until help arrived. The snowmobiles burst into the clearing like lifelines tearing through the storm. Engines screamed as rescuers jumped off before the machines had even stopped. Headlights swept across the snow, illuminating Rex first, lying rigid beside 2 motionless bodies. Fur crusted with ice, eyes wild but unyielding. There, someone shouted. Rex lifted his head instantly, barking once, sharp and urgent, then stepping aside just enough to let them through. He refused to leave, staying close as gloved hands tore into the snow around the officers. Careful! A medic yelled. They're hypothermic. Snow flew as shovels and hands worked together, uncovering Daniel first. His breathing was shallow, uneven, but present. An oxygen mask was pressed to his face as a medic checked his pulse. He's alive, the medic confirmed. Barely relief flickered, then vanished as attention shifted to the second officer. Lisa. Her body was dangerously still. A medic dropped to his knees beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. His face tightened. I don't have a pulse, he said. The words hit like a punch. No. Check again. Another rescuer snapped. Rex let out a low, distressed cry and nudged Lisa's shoulder, whining as if begging her to wake up. Snow clung to her lashes. Her skin was blue and waxy. Start CPR now, the lead medic ordered. They moved fast, compressions in the snow. Breaths forced into frozen lungs, hands working against time itself. Rex circled frantically, barking, then laid down beside her again, pressing his body against her side as if lending his warmth and strength. Come on, the medic muttered. Come on, stay with us. Emily watched from the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a blanket, held back by an officer's arm. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her hands together, whispering over and over, Please, please. Seconds stretched into agony. Then, I've got something. A medic shouted. Lisa's chest jerked violently as she sucked in a shallow breath. Another followed, weak battery Al. She's back. Someone yelled. The clearing erupted into movement. 4 lines were started. Thermal blankets wrapped tight. Oxygen tanks hissed as they worked to stabilize both officers. Rex finally collapsed to the ground beside them, panting heavily, exhaustion overtaking him now that the danger had eased. As stretchers were lifted and rushed toward the snowmobiles, Rex struggled to his feet and followed until one of the handlers knelt and caught him gently. You did it, boy, he said, voice thick. You held on long enough. The engines roared again as the convoy sped away. Behind them, the storm continued to rage, but in the clearing, life had won. The truth came out slowly. It wasn't until the officers were stabilized and adrenaline faded that pieces finally began fitting together. Inside the emergency command center, investigators replayed the last hours of Daniel and Lisa's patrol, listening to fragments of radio chatter that had once seemed routine. Now they sounded different. Daniel's voice had been calm but alert. Lisa's replies measured, careful. They hadn't been lost. They'd been watching someone. Earlier that morning, the 2 officers had spotted a vehicle parked near the closed service road. Engine off. Plates partially obscured. The kind of thing criminals used when they didn't want to be found. When Daniel approached, the driver panicked. The confrontation escalated fast. Too fast. What no one had known at the time was that the suspect wasn't alone. Hidden deeper in the forest was something far more dangerous. A stash tied to a larger operation, evidence that could destroy a network of criminals who'd been operating unnoticed for years. Daniel and Lisa had found it. They were taken by surprise. The lead investigator said grimly, overpowered, bound, silenced. The room fell quiet. Buried alive. Not as an accident. Not to hide bodies, but to make sure they were never found. The suspect had assumed the snowstorm would erase everything. Tracks, signs of struggle, time itself. By the time anyone came looking, the forest would have swallowed the truth along with the officers. They were wrong. Emily's name appeared in every report. So did Rex's. Without the dog's training, his ability to sense life beneath the snow, no search pattern would have uncovered them in time. The clearing where they were found didn't register as suspicious on any map. No heat signatures, no visible disturbance. Just silence. This wasn't luck, the investigator said quietly. This was instinct, loyalty, and timing. As officers worked the case, arrests followed quickly. Warrants were issued. Evidence buried in the forest was recovered and linked directly to the suspects responsible for what nearly became a double homicide. Justice was already moving, but in the hospital, none of that mattered yet. Daniel and Lisa lay in separate rooms, hooked to monitors, wrapped in blankets, alive against every odd. Doctors called it a miracle. Medics called it impossible. But the ones who knew the truth, the ones who'd seen it, they all said the same thing. A little girl listened when no one else could, and a police dog refused to give up. The hospital hallway was too quiet. Machines hummed softly behind closed doors, monitors beeping in steady, unforgiving rhythms. Emily sat on a plastic chair that felt far too big for her, feet dangling above the floor. She clutched her jacket in both hands, twisting the fabric over and over until her fingers hurt. Time moved differently here. Minutes stretched into hours. Every passing nurse made her heart jump. Every muffled announcement over the intercom sent a jolt of fear through her chest. Rex lay at her feet, finally still, head resting on his paws. But even now, his ears flicked at every sound. He hadn't truly relaxed. Not yet. Across the hall, doctors moved in and out of Lisa's room with tense expressions. Daniel's condition had stabilized, but Lisa's was different. Hypothermia had stolen too much. Oxygen deprivation had done its damage. She flatlined twice in transit. A medic whispered quietly to another. Emily heard it anyway. Her throat tightened. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her hands to her mouth, trying not to cry out loud. She felt small again. Helpless, like the forest had followed her here. Rex lifted his head and looked at her. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Please?" she whispered into his fur. "You can't stop now. She needs you." As if sensing something, Rex stood suddenly. Tail stiff eyes locked on Lisa's room. Inside the room, alarms screamed. Doctors rushed in. A nurse shouted for a crash cart. The monitor's steady rhythm broke into a flat, piercing tone that sliced through the hallway. "She's gone!" someone yelled. Emily froze. Her world tilted violently, as if the ground beneath her had vanished. She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head in denial. "No, no, no," she whispered. Inside the room, compressions began. Fast. Relentless. A doctor barked orders. Another prepared the defibrillator. The paddles charged with a rising whine. Clear. Lisa's body jerked. Nothing. Again. Clear. Shock. Still. Nothing. Rex barked suddenly, one sharp, desperate sound, then lunged toward the door, straining against the handler holding his harness. "Wait," the doctor said suddenly, staring at the monitor. Everyone froze. A blip appeared. Then, another. A weak, uneven line crawled across the screen. "I've got a rhythm," the nurse breathed. Lisa gasped, a shallow, ragged breath. But a breath. The room erupted into controlled chaos as doctors worked to stabilize her, voices overlapping with urgency and disbelief. Out in the hallway, Emily collapsed against Rex, sobbing openly now. The handler let go, and Rex pressed his head into her chest, steady and warm. Against the odds, against the cold, against time itself, Lisa was still alive, and everyone in that hallway knew they'd just witnessed a miracle. Morning light filtered softly through the hospital windows, pale and gentle, as if afraid to disturb what had happened during the night. Emily sat curled up in the same chair, eyes red and swollen from crying, head resting against Rex's shoulder. Neither of them had slept. They hadn't needed to. Waiting had consumed every ounce of energy they had. When the doctor finally approached, his expression was different this time. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't tense. He smiled. "They're both stable," he said quietly. "We moved them out of critical care an hour ago." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Both," she whispered. The doctor nodded. "Both." The words shattered something inside her, releasing everything she'd been holding in. She covered her face as tears streamed through her fingers, relief crashing over her in waves so strong she could barely stay upright. Rex lifted his head and wagged his tail once, slow and deliberate, as if he understood exactly what had just been said. "The hypothermia was severe," the doctor continued, kneeling so he was eye level with her. "Another 10 minutes in that snow and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Emily looked down at Rex, voice trembling. "He saved them." The doctor followed her gaze, studying the dog with quiet respect. "Yes," he said softly. "He did." Later that day, Emily was allowed to see them. Daniel was awake first, pale but smiling weakly as she stepped into his room. His voice was rough, movements slow, but his eyes were clear. "You're the kid," he said, managing a faint chuckle. "The one who didn't give up." Emily shook her head quickly. "Rex found you." Daniel reached out and rested his hand gently on the dog's head. "Then you both saved us." In the next room, Lisa slept peacefully, wrapped in blankets. A steady monitor beside her bed. Her chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths. Proof that she was still here. Emily stood there for a long moment, who's watching. She hadn't realized how heavy fear was until it was gone. Outside the room, nurses whispered about miracles, about timing, about impossible survival stories that shouldn't have ended this way. But Emily knew the truth. It wasn't just luck. It was a little girl who listened, a dog who refused to leave, and 2 officers who held on just long enough. In a forest, once buried in silence, life had won. The story didn't end at the hospital. Its breath. By the next morning, news vans lined the street outside, cameras pointed toward the entrance, reporters speaking in hushed, urgent tones. A rescue that should have ended in tragedy had somehow turned into something else entirely. Hope. Inside, Emily sat beside her father, his arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders, as if letting go might make her disappear. He hadn't stopped shaking since he arrived. Not from the cold, from the realization of how close he'd come to losing her. "You shouldn't have been out there," he whispered, voice breaking. "But thank you." Emily didn't know what to say. She just leaned into him. Rex pressed firmly against her other side. Officers from every department came to visit Daniel and Lisa. Some brought flowers. Others brought quiet tears. Seasoned men and women who'd seen too much stood silently at their bedsides, shaken by how close they'd come to attending the funerals instead. Daniel joked weakly about owing Rex a lifetime supply of treats. Lisa, still pale but smiling, reached out and took Emily's hand the first time she saw her. "You didn't run away," she said softly. "You stayed. That matters." Emily swallowed hard. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But you did," Lisa replied, and that changed everything. Later that afternoon, a small ceremony took place in the hospital courtyard. Nothing official. No speeches. Just people who needed to acknowledge what had happened. Rex sat calmly as a police captain knelt and clipped a silver medallion onto his harness. It read Canine Valor Award. Applause broke out, soft at first, then louder. Rex wagged his tail once. Emily stood beside him, cheeks burning, overwhelmed by the attention. Someone handed her a folded flag, pressed gently into her hands. "For bravery," the captain said, "and for listening when it mattered." The cameras captured it all. But none of that was what made the moment unforgettable. What mattered was Daniel and Lisa standing together nearby, still weak, still healing, but alive. Alive because a little girl trusted her instincts. Alive because a dog refused to leave. And alive because sometimes heroes don't wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four legs. Weeks later, the forest looked different. The snow had melted just enough to reveal the ground beneath. Muddy, scarred, no longer hiding what it once had. Yellow tape marked the clearing where everything had changed, fluttering softly in the breeze. It no longer felt ominous. It felt honest. Daniel and Lisa stood side by side, stronger now. Uniforms crisp, movement steady. They'd returned to the place they nearly died, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. "We shouldn't be here," Daniel said quietly. "But we are," Lisa replied. Emily stood with her father a few steps back, Rex sitting proudly at her side. He watched the officers carefully, tail wagging once as they approached. "We owe you our lives," Lisa said, kneeling in front of Emily. Her voice was calm, but her eyes shone. "Not just for finding us, but for believing we were still worth saving." Emily shook her head. "Rex knew," she said simply. "I just followed him." Lisa smiled and reached out, placing her hand on Rex's head. "Then he taught us something important." Later that day, charges were officially announced. The men responsible for burying the officers were in custody. Evidence recovered from the forest dismantled an entire criminal operation. What was meant to silence the truth had exposed it instead. At a press conference, a reporter asked Daniel what had gone through his mind when he realized he might not survive. He didn't hesitate. "I thought about my family," he said. "And then I thought about the sound of digging. I knew someone hadn't given up on us." Lisa added quietly, "Hope is a powerful thing. So is loyalty." As the crowd dispersed, Emily walked away from the cameras, back toward the trees. Rex trotted beside her, relaxed now, finally at peace. The forest was quiet again, but this time the silence felt earned. Because 2 lives had been returned, truth had been uncovered, and the little girl had learned something she would carry forever. Sometimes the smallest voice makes the biggest difference. Heroes don't always come when you call. Sometimes they're already listening.